Coming up today, the general nominated to be the next commander of US forces Korea says South Korea could be tempted to get its own nuclear weapons if the US ever removed its nuclear umbrella over the country. The power struggle is on in South Korea's National Assembly. Party leaders trade barbs over contentious issues, denting hope for progress at the final session of this parliament, which starts tomorrow. First, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton score big wins in New York. It puts both in a strong position to go head-to-head in the race for the White House. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Wednesday, the 20th of April. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you ever so much for joining us today. I'm Mark Broom. The domestic political scene is our starting point this lunchtime, and with the dust settling on last week's general election, Korea's three main political parties are focusing on who will lead them now. The ruling Saenuri party is currently being led by floor leader Won Yu-chol, that man there, after the party chair resigned following the election. Won says he's considering passing the torch to the incoming floor leader, who will take office in May, especially since many lawmakers have expressed objections to keeping him on as the party chair. The main opposition Minju Party of Korea's interim leader, Kim Jong-in, is facing a similar situation. Some party members say Kim should take the chairmanship without an election, while others say it's time to give others a chance to lead. And the minor opposition People's Party is seeing the veteran lawmakers in its ranks vie for leadership roles, including a four-term lawmaker who was once a close aide to former President Kim Dae-jung. So, the final session of Korea's 19th National Assembly starts on Thursday, with lawmakers convening for the first time since last week's general election. Pretty much flipped Korea's political landscape on its head. There are concerns, however, that the new dynamic will further solidify the party's inability to thrash out their differences and get some key bills passed. Ji Myung-gil reports.
The ruling Saenuri party hopes to pass 4 labor reform bills, a bill to promote the service industry, and an anti-cyber terrorism bill during April's extra parliamentary session. The newly emboldened opposition bloc, however, has refused to endorse any of them. The main opposition Minju Party of Korea says the labor reform bills will only increase the number of non-regular workers and make it easier for companies to fire their employees. The party also says the service industry promotion bill could lead to the privatization of all medical services, which would trigger a dramatic increase in medical costs. Concerning the anti-cyber terrorism bill, the Minju Party is against setting up a cybersecurity center under the authority of the National Intelligence Service. The main opposition party says it will focus on other economic bills designed to protect small and medium-sized businesses. The minor opposition People's Party agrees with the Minju Party in extending the term of a special committee investigating this Hyundai ferry disaster that killed more than 300 people just over 2 years ago. The 20th National Assembly will begin on May 30th. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Now, the man next in line to lead American troops stationed in Korea says the U.S. needs to continue providing a nuclear umbrella to South Korea. General Vincent Brooks also rejected claims made by the Republican frontrunner in the race for the White House. He said Donald Trump has got his math wrong on a very important issue. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
The incoming commander of U.S. Forces Korea has stressed the importance of South Korea being covered by the U.S. nuclear umbrella. Speaking at his Senate confirmation hearing in Washington on Tuesday, General Vincent Brooks said his removal could make Seoul contemplate its own nuclear armament in the face of threats posed by North Korea. He added that he could not see a time in the foreseeable future when the U.S. could or would remove it. The general also stressed that South Korea is shouldering a significant load of the cost for keeping the roughly 29,000 U.S. troops stationed in the country. He rejected Republican presidential frontrunner Donald Trump's claims that Seoul contributes next to nothing compared to what it gets in return. Brooks noted that South Korea paid some $880 million last year, and the share goes up according to inflation every year. As well as paying around half of the total cost of stationing troops, the general says South Korea is paying more than 90% of the $10.8 billion to relocate U.S. troops to a massive new base in Pyeongtaek, south of Seoul. Brooks also emphasized the need for a U.S. missile defense system known as THAAD to be deployed to the Korean peninsula to protect the South from North Korea's growing ballistic missile threats. If confirmed, Brooks will replace General Curtis Scaparrotti as U.S. Forces Korea commander. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
South Korea, the United States and Japan have been discussing response measures against North Korea's failed ballistic missile launch, as well as further provocations from the regime, including a possible fifth nuclear test. South Korea's top nuclear envoy, Kim Hong-gyun, and his US and Japanese counterparts, Sung Kim and Kimihiro Ishikane, put their heads together on trilateral cooperation, as well as the implementation of multilateral and unilateral sanctions. Now, this meeting was held on the sidelines of a vice-ministerial level meeting that was held the day before on Tuesday. Now, later on this Wednesday, Seoul and Washington's representatives will continue one-on-one talks on the same matter. They are expected to touch on ways to increase cooperation from China. North Korea is under some of the harshest multi-layered sanctions ever imposed on a country, but loopholes still exist for the regime to keep the money flowing in. This in an editorial for US-based North Korea monitoring website 38 North. In it, Andrea Berger, a deputy director of the Nuclear Policy Program at the Royal United Services Institute, says blacklisted North Korean firms doing trade with Namibia is a good case in point. Berger says that despite the sanctions, construction firms Mansudae overseas and the Korea Mining Development Trading Corporation are still involved in the building of a military base in the African country. She also mentions cases where officials from the latter went on trips via Pakistan to drum up more overseas business. Berger also accuses Russia of overlooking the international sanctions and allowing Pyongyang to sell blacklisted machine tools. The death toll from the earthquake that rocked Ecuador last weekend now stands at 480, with more than 4,000 injured, and those numbers are expected to rise. The Ecuadorian government says around $600 million in credit from multilateral lenders has been activated to finance emergency efforts. The United Nations World Food Programme is sending enough food to feed 8,000 people in the worst hit areas for 15 days, and bottled drinking water is expected to arrive on Wednesday. President Park on Wednesday sent a letter of condolence to her Ecuadorian counterpart, expressing sympathy, adding that she hopes the country can recover soon. Now, although there was no major upset really, there was still a huge win for Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Hwang Ho-jun has the latest on the results from the New York presidential primary. Ho-jun, what can you tell us?
Well, Mark, with more than two-thirds of the votes counted as of 11:50 a.m. Korea time, the New York natives have proven they still have staying power in their home states and both greatly increase their chances of clinching their party's nomination. The top of Empire State Building turned deep red after CNN projected Trump's win just moments after the polls closed. The real estate mogul and Queens native won with 59.9% rather of the vote. Ohio Governor John Kasich came second with 25.2%, and Texas Senator Ted Cruz with 14.9%. Trump thanked his supporters, calling them the people who know him best. It took a little longer to get the results on the Democratic side, but former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton clinched a crucial win against her rival Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders with 57.3% of the vote to his 42.7%. Clinton's win turned the top of the Empire State Building dark blue, and she said in her victory speech that the win in her home state is personal for her. Back to you, Mark.
Well, thank you very much, Ho-jun, for that report. And once the full results are in, we'll bring you all the results one way or the other, although we do know that it is Trump and Clinton that have won. Just we don't know the exact margin quite yet. Now, in other news, a UN human rights official has spoken out about what he says is the Japanese government's intervention in press independence and how the public's right to know. He cited Japan's attempts to remove from textbooks content related to wartime sex slavery as an example of government censorship. Oh Soo-young reports.
Tokyo shouldn't violate the Japanese public's right to know about the wartime atrocities that Tokyo committed during the Second World War. That's according to David Kaye, UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Expression, who is speaking about the Japanese government's omission of its role in wartime sex slavery, or the so-called comfort women issue, from its textbooks. According to the Sankei Shimbun newspaper, Kaye said at a press briefing on Tuesday that he felt the Japanese government had political motivations for removing the controversial content, and he said the government shouldn't be rewriting history. Kaye highlighted the case of former Asahi Shimbun reporter Uemura Takashi, who said he was harassed for his reporting on Japan's sexual enslavement of Korean women. During the briefing, Kaye voiced strong concerns about government censorship, including what he called serious threats to the independence of the press. He said that he'd noticed evidence of government exploitation during his meetings with officials and journalists, and that he'd been surprised by the widespread fear among the journalists, who work under heavy pressure from local politicians to avoid sensitive issues. Kaye cited a weak system of legal protection, persistent government exploitation of a media lacking in professional solidarity. He also warned that laws made to protect coverage fairness and national security could work as censorship. Kaye will submit a full report with his observations to the UN Human Rights Council next year. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Now, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank say they are joining arms with other international organizations to fight tax evasion. The move was prompted by the recent revelation of the Panama Papers. Park Jong-hong tells us more.
4 global organizations are combining efforts to tackle tax evasion. The initiative, led by the IMF and the World Bank, also includes the United Nations and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. The joint platform will collaborate on tax issues and developing new tools and standards to halt tax-based erosion and evasion, with a primary focus on helping developing nations better combat tax evasion. The announcement comes on the heels of the leakage of the so-called Panama Papers that triggered an international outcry. The documents revealed the widespread use of tax havens and shell companies by global elites and corporations to hide assets and avoid paying taxes. For starters, the joint group will deliver what insiders call toolkits to developing countries to help them deal with corporations using accounting tactics to lower their tax bills. Another goal is to develop appropriate policies for the taxation of multinational enterprises. Park Jong-hong, Arirang News.
Now, staying with economic news, but a little closer to home, Korea's producer prices edged down to their lowest point in 6 years last month, continuing the steady downward streak they've been on for quite a while now. The Bank of Korea says the prices were down 0.1% in March from the previous month. The drop mainly came from lower electricity, gas and other utility bills. They declined over 3% compared to a month before, with producer prices being a major indicator for consumer prices. It's widely forecast that prices will remain low. Korea's main stock market, the benchmark Kospi, rose slightly over 1.75% in the first 3 months of 2016. With the Kospi's rate of on-quarter increase, Korea was ranked 17th out of the world's 40 major stock markets. According to Seoul-based Daeshin Securities, the nation's stocks fared well amid a slowing global economy. China's stock market was down 15.1% and Japan's nearly 12% over the same period. Of the 21 underperforming nations, 13 were European, affected by the struggling banking system there and Britain's possible exit from the European Union. Kia Motors reported record sales of its Sportage SUV in Europe last month on the back of strong demand for its latest model. According to industry data, Kia sold over 18,000 units of the Sportage in Europe in March. That's up a whopping 44% on year. Of them, around 14,000 were the latest fourth-generation model, which went on sale just last month. The latest figure represents Kia's highest ever sales for a single model since it entered the European market in 1990. Hyundai Motor also fared well in Europe thanks to its Tucson SUV, whose sales jumped nearly 50% on year in the same month. The Korean automaker sold over 103,000 cars in Europe in March, up nearly 12% from a year earlier, and easily topping their previous record set in March of last year. Now, anyone felt a bit warm recently? It turns out the Earth's global temperatures in March were the most abnormally warm on record for any month in history. New data from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration also shows that it has been the hottest year to date, with January, February and March each passing the mark set in 2015, itself the hottest year on record. Now, the release of the US-based administration's Global Climate Report makes it the third independent agency, along with NASA and the Japan Meteorological Association, to reach similar findings, even though they all use slightly different methods. The lead author of this report says this year's unusually strong El Niño has been exacerbated by global warming, a result, she says, of greenhouse gas emissions by humans. Well, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broom. Thank you as always for watching. We'll be back with our next scheduled newscast at 3 p.m. Korea time. So until then, goodbye.